Thank you so much for being here and for tuning in to our Facebook Live. This is a continuation of our Facebook Live series, Connecting with LDS. And today's topic is essential. Maybe in the conversation will be difficult at specific times, and we'll discuss that in the next few minutes. But it's about caregiving and its impact on mental health and on the well-being of the caregiver as well as the care recipient. So before we start, I want to provide some housekeeping rules. The Facebook Live today will be in English, but please feel free to ask any question or comment in French, and I will translate and relay the information to our panelists today. Also, please use the chat to provide me with your questions and comments. Today's live will be recorded, and we will be sharing it after to our Facebook page. So if you are having lunch and you didn't have today time now to listen to us, so you can watch the video and the recording later on. Also, I wanted to say that we will be providing with resources for caregiving and mental health. And this is because I want to acknowledge, as I mentioned earlier, that this topic can be emotionally heavy. So please take the time you need and if you need any break as needed. So with that, I would like you to join me to welcoming our panelists. So just give me a second here to invite them to our live.
Hello.
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Very, very well. So I'm on our other panelists. Should be. Let me see. Excited to discuss today's topic, Lindsay?
Very much so.
Amazing. I don't know. I'm accepting. Okay. Accept. It's telling me adding. Hello, Elyse.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. So we're just waiting on Shweta. I see her. It's just, and I'm accepting, but I don't know why it's not working. That she. Shweta, can you, if you are with us, can you please put on the chat if you're having any technical difficulties joining us? I'm gonna try again. She's saying not saying anything here. I'm sending, because I can see you. Like I see that you're you sent me an invite and I'm accepting. Would you like to log in back? The reality of our all the technical issues.
Always when you need it to work.
Always.
Like, nope.
All right, she's saying sure, so she should be coming here. So while I wait for another invitation from Shweta. Hi, Liz. Thank you for joining. All right. So Shweta, I have accepted. Let me know in the chat if it's working. If you receive my, she says it's not letting me. Okay. Oh, let me see. It's adding. It's telling me adding. Probably it's working. All right, let's see. All right, so while it's telling me that Shweta will be joining us soon, hopefully, oh, accept. I think it's gonna work. All right, so while we're waiting for Shweta to join us, I can see that it's working, and she's gonna be added soon to our Facebook Live. So let's jump into our topic. So we are at the end of the month of October. The leaves changed color. If you are in our side of the world, the days feel longer. And with the change of the seasons comes a shift in our focus on mental health. October isn't just the National Awareness Month on mental health struggles in Canada. The World Health Organization has declared October 10th as the World Mental Health Day. And that is, we need to raise more awareness on mental health issues around the world. So today's topic on caregiving and mental health struggle is necessary, it's essential. As research have shown, caregiving can have a positive experience, but if we don't have proper support for the caregivers, the stress associated with caregiving responsibilities can compromise the well-being of both the caregiver and the care recipient. So with that in mind, I would like to welcome our panelists. Thank you for being here. I don't see Shweta, it didn't work. I'm gonna try to figure out the technical issue with her, but Elyse, would you like to introduce yourself as you are part of a great organization, the Canadian Mental Health Association in Canada?
Yes, thanks so much. So my name is Elyse. I work for the Canadian Mental Health Association Edmonton region. So little side note, important to note that Canadian Mental Health Association is broken up in a number of different ways. So there's CMHA National. We also have CMHA provincially, and then each region is broken, or each province rather, is broken up into region. So I am with the Edmonton region. However, a lot of our supports are online, and that is consistent with a lot of other CMHA regions. So just to kind of side note that if you're like, oh, I don't live in Alberta, I can't access it. But I am a peer support facilitator for a program called Caregiver Connections. And so Caregiver Connections is all about caregivers of loved ones with mental illness and supporting them. So as I'm sure we all know, oftentimes our focus is on the loved one, and the caregiver's well-being and mental health can sometimes suffer because of that. And that's very natural and understandable. But the caregivers need to look after themselves too. So I'm really passionate about self-care, sustainable self-care, and finding ways to both support ourselves as well as our loved ones.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Lindsay is a dear colleague of mine at the foundation, but today she's wearing a different hat. So Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Jita. Yes, today I am here as a caregiver. In my professional life, I work with the Loeys-Dietz Syndrome Foundation Canada. I manage patient support and research programs. And today, like I said, here's a caregiver. I have relatives with syndrome, and although I consider myself a part-time caregiver, I'm here with lots of experience and look forward to sharing that voice today.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I'm trying it with Shweta. It says it's adding, so hopefully it's gonna work. I can introduce Shweta while she is joining. Shweta, she has over 18 years of experience in both the nursing and mental health fields. In 2017, she founded her own company, Rapid Action Health, and her focus is to provide a well-rounded and unique approach to health and wellness. Shweta is passionate about helping others overcome their struggles and improve their lives. She believes that despite challenges, whether they may be health, emotional, or situationally related, everyone has the potential to lead a happy and fulfilling life. It's really nice to have that kind of mission in her life. So with that, I would like to introduce the foundation. So my name is Jita. I'm the executive director of the Loeys-Dietz Syndrome Foundation Canada. We are a national charitable organization. We are dedicated to the promotion of research, education, and increasing awareness on our rare disease, Loeys-Dietz syndrome. And our vision is that we want to improve the lives, but also the quality of life of patients, families, caregivers affected by LDS. So we can jump into our topic with caregiving. And with that, if you allow me, I would like to give a brief description or definition of the caregiver. So caregiver is someone who cares for another person, the care recipient. And the caregiver, it can be a paid or unpaid, and it could be short-term or long-term. And the caregiver initially be a stranger to the care, but it also can be someone who is close and of the social circle of the care recipients. So Loeys-Dietz is a genetic condition, and I'm saying this because us to keep that in mind, that so we will have families affected by Loeys-Dietz. The caregivers sometimes will also be themselves affected by LDS. And LDS is a disease that causes chronic health conditions, and chronic health conditions can go in parallel as well with mental conditions. So our goal today with our guests is I share information and answer all the questions that the families watching us today have on that kind of aspect. So I hope they will find this. So before we go into our question, delve into more our topic, do you have anything to add to the definition I have on caregiving? Would you like to add to that? Dimensions.
I think for me, when I think of caregiving, I think our brains often default to the physical act of caregiving and caring. And like when we actually look at and think about what care means, that can also be very emotional. So for, with the clients that I work with and in my own experience as a caregiver, it's not just the physical caregiving, but it's also that emotional support. So sometimes we'll have people ask like, well, they don't live with me, or they don't, financially depend on me. And for us, that is not part of the definition. It's anybody that you are supporting physically, emotionally, financially, whatever that is struggling. So I like to broaden or not broaden, but kind of redefine what caregiving means sometimes.
I was going to expand in a similar way and about the fact that caregivers it doesn't necessarily mean the person living with somebody, or that it is a more broad area than people may originally think. And from a distance, it's very common, and probably maybe even more common than caregiving right in the home.
Thank you very much for your addition to that definition. I'm still unable to have Shweta join us, so while I think I'm gonna keep trying to add her to the Facebook Live. I feel very, because we actually tried this right before and it worked. I really don't understand why this is happening. So I'm gonna keep trying to see how we can add her to our Facebook Live. So I want to provide some statistics and what does the research show in terms of caregiving. So it is a very common phenomenon in Canada. More than half of the people will become caregivers, whether to their family or their friends. And the research have demonstrated that it does have a positive impact, but also have negative effects on mental health. So for some caregivers, the act of caregiving provides positive mental health benefits, such as satisfaction. People feel satisfied that they're caring for someone else, and it's often provide closeness to that person. And in research, some caregivers describe that as an enriching personal experience. And on the other side, caregiving can put, so the stress of having to care to someone will put them at risk of anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping, and chronic stress, and many more issues. And because of that, it will lead to social isolation, financial hardship, and physical illness. So all of that relates, it is negatively impact on the mental health and on the well-being. So the correlation we have with Loeys-Dietz, that is a chronic, it can cause chronic condition. Patients will reportedly experience mental health struggles, and this is often due to their acute events. So first of all, just the diagnosis itself can cause mental health struggles, the surgery, and then after that, the hospitalization and the rehabilitation, and all the lifestyle changes that come with the diagnosis. So keeping that in mind, how are caregivers affected when their care recipients live with chronic health conditions and mental health conditions? Elyse, would you like to would you add to that?
Yeah. So I think we can be affected in a multitude of different ways. I know in my experience and the experience of a lot of my clients, there's a real sense of grief that can be experienced. Grief for, the life we wanted for our loved ones, the life we wanted for ourselves, maybe the experiences they won't have or will have because of that, illness or condition that they're experiencing. So I think grief is a big one. Burnout on both ends, right? Having the desire to heal, be well, can really create a lot of stress and a lot of desire to kind of fix and heal and all of that. But over time, for both the caregiver as well as the loved one, it can become exhausting, and it can become something that we can almost feel is a weight on our shoulders, because we're just constantly kind of trying to heal. And sometimes with success, maybe fully or to some degree, or to have at least some sort of change in experience. So I think it can be overwhelming as well, and remembering that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think I hear from a lot of caregivers being like, okay, and we're doing this, and we're seeing this specialist, and we're talking to this person, and I've been there, both experiencing chronic illness, but also being a caregiver of a loved one with mental illness and chronic health issues. That's only sustainable for so long. And so caregiver burnout, patient burnout can become very real. And with that comes other mental health challenges and other physical health challenges as well. So I think it can become a pretty robust experience, regardless of the condition that you're dealing with. It can be a lot.
Thank you. Lindsay, with your personal experience, what would you like to add?
I would love to speak, as a person who has a lot of experience with Loeys-Dietz syndrome. It is both a chronic and acute syndrome. In my mind, I know that day-to-day struggles are difficult. There's a lot of chronic pain and issues with just day-to-day life. And then there's the acute issues of worrying about dissection, worrying about some very scary events that can happen, and genetic syndrome. A lot of people have a very good reason for worrying about that, considering seen it happen to other people that they are related to, or maybe it's so there is a hypervigilance that comes with being a caregiver to an LDS patient. There's stress that comes with receiving phone calls, even sometimes worrying about news is going to be on the other end. And being in a hypervigilant state is exhausting. It's beyond what your care recipient is actually going through at the moment. They have a very great period of time. They could be doing very well, and for an LDS patient, be in a very stable condition. But at the same time, there's always this thought in the back of your mind that other shoe could drop. And it is very, very exhausting being on that side of things.
You bring in thing dimension, and I want to delve into it more. So if we're talking like caregiving, caregiver is from the family, and it's not someone from the outside circle of the family. So how do these dynamics change? So for example, we have it's the parent who is caring for the child, but then in other cases, partner, it's the spouse that is caring for the patient or care recipient. So how do these dynamics change once you have a diagnosis for a chronic disease? I don't know if Lindsay or Elyse, who would like to jump in on that.
From my own experience, the diagnosis didn't so much change much. We knew that there was something in my family for a very long time, and that is a common story in LDS diagnosis, that you know something is wrong before you actually have the words to put to the issue. So we knew that there was something, and it was something serious, and we suspected which family members might have had it. When we received the diagnosis, it more solidified things. It clarified a lot. It was a great blessing to have that clarification. And in my caregiving role, it gave me an opportunity, a person who loves to plan, loves checklists, to have everything in order. It did give me an opportunity to create plans, which puts my mind at peace, which is a huge benefit to me.
Thank you for sharing. Elyse, would you like to add that anything family dynamic diagnosis is done?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a caveat, it really depends on the family as well as the relational experience, but and the time of how long somebody has been in that caregiving role. I think from my experience, but also some of my clients' experiences, there is a level of what you were saying, Lindsay, of like, okay, we know what's happening now. We can make a plan. We can move forward. We can talk to specialists, and it can kind of be an empowering dynamic. However, over time, I've seen that shift in certain relationships where you then become, maybe if it's a partner, you're then in more of a caregiving focused role than a relational dynamic. If you have kids also, and you're caregiving for your spouse as well as your kids, if you are, fairly young, like myself, I was supporting my dad from a very young age. And that was, when we get older, we think, oh, okay, yes, children eventually care for their parents. But as a younger person, I was like, I'm 20, like what? I'm choosing to caregive over and support in a way that maybe wasn't normal or what we would define as normal or natural in the order of things that were typically shown. So I think that can cause strain on the relationship. And I think that can ebb and flow, right? There can be periods of time where we're empowered and we are working together and we want to support each other. And then there can be times where maybe the loved one is like taking a step back from actively looking for health solutions or working with doctors. And I know from my experience, somebody who likes to like be in control, I would often push my loved one's boundaries and be like, but have you done this? Have you gone to the doctor? And that created a relational strain in that I wasn't respecting where he was at. So I think it can be really complex, and to say that, if that's something that you're experiencing, relational dynamics or challenges within your relationship with the person that you're caregiving for, or if you are experiencing that as the person receiving the care, kind of taking a look at like their experience versus my experience on either side of the spectrum. Because, Lindsay, as you were saying, being the caregiver, it can feel very disempowering. It can feel like you don't have a grip on the situation. You're in hypervigilance, you're stressed, you're looking for the next possible thing to go wrong. And that's a really hard place to live, especially when it's not your own body, your own experience, and you can't know all the things and predict all the things. That can be really challenging. But then our brain starts to look for that in every situation in life. So we can start to have anxiety crop up, stress crop up in other areas of life because we're just primed to be looking for things to fall apart on us. And so that can create other relationship dynamic challenges. And so I think it's a really like interweaved web of ways that it could go, but to say that changes in the relationship and the dynamic are really normal and probably to be expected to some degree.
Thank you so much for this. I want to say I don't know why I'm unable to bring in Shweta, so I'm going to ask her to add any comment or her response in the chat, and I will provide it. We're really sorry about this technical difficulty. So she is actually saying there's a confusion. It's hard to discern when you are a spouse versus a caregiver role, and definitely that to take that into consideration. So speaking of diagnosis, let's say in the case of Loeys-Dietz specifically, you have chronic conditions, so the pain you feel comes with your diagnosis, because you know they have mobility issues that can cause some pain, but they also acute period their diagnosis. For example, when they have to do the surgery and where it can have an acute impact on the mental health and the well-being of the patients, but as well as the caregivers. So in your case, would you like to comment on the changes or the impact it has on the mental health when it is acute period of time versus when it's a chronic? Elyse, would you like to start?
Yeah, so I think with the chronic piece, I think we can, you know, as Lindsay was saying, we have these like kind of low level, not even necessarily low levels, but levels of hypervigilance, planning, waiting for the shoe to drop, is something that a lot of my clients talk about. Like, okay, maybe we're kind of in a period of stability, even with the condition present. But I can't lean into it. I can't trust it because I feel like something's going to happen and blindside me, and I'm not going to be prepared for it. My loved one's not going to be prepared for it. And so, and you know, in the experience of the caregivers that I work with and my own as well, it's hard even when we can find those periods of peacefulness, say, to settle into that. And then when the acute thing happens, our bias to looking towards the acute thing is kind of confirmed, like, see, the shoe did drop, you know, make sure that you're always staying on guard. So we kind of get that confirmation of the stressors that we have, or the hypervigilance towards the acute episode. But also that adds that extra layer of pain, of illness to both the loved one, as well as, you know, how we're supporting them and caring for them. So, you know, I don't have anyone in my family that suffers from LDS or that experiences LDS. But, you know, having my own chronic illness and having acute flares of it, and from my own perspective, feeling really helpless when that happens. And I know my loved ones feel really helpless because in those moments, they can't really do anything for me. I'm just in it and experiencing it and doing what I can to cope with it. So for me in those acute, it's obviously looking after the physical health in whatever way is necessary for that acute experience. but also doing what we can to like support and hold ourselves through it until we can get to a space where maybe we can settle back down a little bit. But again, then it's hard because we're like, okay, but then the next thing is going to happen. So it's this, we really have to work with that, I think. Otherwise we can just get caught in this ongoing experience of worrying about the acute thing happening and then the acute thing happening and then worrying about the acute thing happening and then it happening, in that kind of cycle.
Lindsay, do you want to share in your experience if you feel similar?
Absolutely. I think you put beautiful words to things that are tough to describe, and I might not do it so eloquently, but in my experience, when an acute situation arises, I go into a survival mode, and I am excellent in a crisis because I am not allowing myself to take care of myself in that time. Everything that is pushed aside. I am one step in front of the other. I am surviving and I am getting things done. But that results in a very big crash afterwards. And it's a trauma response, which I am very aware of and work very hard with my therapist on. But I do suffer these episodes of just survival mode with a large crash afterwards. And I have learned to allow myself to bring some of the emotion in as I'm going through the crisis times. I've learned how to find the moments where I can let some of it out, release some of it, and I have found that has helped me immensely. But yeah, it is a trauma that then adds to, like Elyse was saying, previous hypervigilance. Now you have that baseline for the acute event, and now you are operating at a higher hypervigilance that has been reaffirmed by the experience.
Previous.
Of course, you were right to be hypervigilant, as you were saying, and it is not a full attitude at all, which I can attest personally.
Thank you. This is very courageous on your end, Lindsay, to be sharing this. And Shweta is still with us. Thank you so much for adding your comments on our chat box. So her comment is anxiety depression is very common on caregivers. So as you both have mentioned, due to the chronic nature of this situation, living chronically in stress states lead to the burnout. And this is exactly what, Lindsay, you also were saying, that you have all that constant mental hammer going on in your mind, which can lead to your emotional burnout if you didn't realize about in the next dimension of that of the discussion. So it's good that you realize that, and then you try to cope with it. So speaking of signs and warning signs, this is the second question I have for you today. So what are the warning signs of mental health struggles in caregivers, and how? So I want to discuss what are the signs and the warnings, but also how can the caregiver acknowledge them? Because the caregiver might, know them, but then never really acknowledge that that person is feeling them. So, Lindsay, do you want to jump on that?
As a caregiver, are you asking about what are the signs of my burnout?
Yeah,
okay.
Your personal experience. What do you feel?
When I am hitting my max and I am near burnout, I am near that need to crash and let my body heal, my hypervigilance is at its highest. I know that I will not accept help. I am going to take control of even more. I am going to push everyone else to the side, because the only thing that will give me peace of mind is that I know what's happening and can be the one to help, which is the exact opposite of what I need. And as a caregiver, I have caregivers. So I know that there are people in my life who recognize that in me and are able to step in. And that experience is incredible, that I have people in my life who can see that, and they are always around the situations where I'm in that state. So talking when I'm doing well, I'm talking to my loved ones about what it looks like when I'm not well. Right now, I can talk about it, and I know that I'm in a safe place, but when I'm in that moment, I'm not able to reach out for help. So it's a bit of preparation on my part, and knowing that I'm asking family members who are stubborn enough to fight back
Yes.
in moments, and that they will push me to allow them to help.
It's an interesting, a very good strategy, Elyse. What would you want to add to that? Do you feel how Lindsay's strategy is something common as well?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think for me, having an understanding of what our baseline is, because burnout has burnout, depression, anxiety, they have, typical experiences, but it can also vary person to person. So, Lindsay, some of us completely shut down. I'm very much like you, where like I thrive in a situation where everybody else is melting down. I'm like, okay, I've got this. And so, but that doesn't always serve me, because then I'm not necessarily holding space for my own emotions in that moment. So I think it's about understanding your baseline. How do I exist with this person? How am I in my caregiving relationship with them? Am I very empathetic? Can I, like, whatever that looks like, kind of understanding your baseline emotions. Because when you understand your baseline, you can then start to notice, okay, I'm starting to really feel frustrated with this person. My empathy feels low. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm snapping at other people in my life. I don't have the desire to connect with people that I typically would, or do the things that I know are good for myself or that I love to do. I'm finding myself like zoning out a lot, or reaching for things that aren't inherently bad, but maybe don't. So, I'm watching hours and hours of Netflix rather than like doing something that I know will make me feel good. And like, I don't necessarily have anything against social media and, those things as ways to self-care, but it's that, what is my baseline and healthy for me? And am I still existing within that? Because we can start to kind of catch ourselves in those phases of edging towards burnout when we're noticing that the way that we're existing in our own life and with the people within that are changing. And, I think there's a multitude of, also watching your own thoughts. Are you feeling really hopeless? Are you lacking the desire to take care of yourself and feel hopefulness towards a situation? And so with that, I think, reaching out for mental health support, Lindsay, I love that you shared, that you see a therapist. I think we all should have a coach, a therapist, somebody to hold space for us. I'm a big proponent of peer support as a peer support facilitator. I think that finding community is so important, because I think caregiving as well as chronic illness can be a very isolating experience, and feeling alone in that, I think just exasperates everything. And like I said in my intro, I'm a big proponent of sustainable self-care. I'm not the person that's going to say like, go have a bath and feel better, right? Maybe that is something for some people.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe that works for some people, but maybe it doesn't for others. Or maybe, big acts of self-care feel really inaccessible. And really, we're starting to understand that it's those slow little pieces, especially when you've lived in a very hypervigilant state for a long period of time. Big acts of self-care can actually feel really uncomfortable and not that good. And so that might kind of pull us away from doing it in the future. So I'm a big proponent of like baby steps towards self-care, small little moments in your day, small little things that don't have to take hours on end to just slowly refill your cup, rather than think like, okay, self-care day, everything's going to be better after today. Because really, that's just not how our body and our nervous system responds. Certainly it helps, but I think it's painted in a light that's not necessarily accurate and accessible.
Yeah, I think your key term there is sustainability. You know, we're gonna discuss that last topic, which is coping strategy, and see how you know we are gonna sustain our coping strategy. So I say that Shweta from Rapid Action Health, she said that the symptoms of stress, depression, anxiety, and burnout can sometimes overlap. And so she gives more details on that. So burnout is exhaustion, is an appetite, sleep, getting sick, often, isolation, which Elyse have very well explained in concrete examples, like just wanting to watch nonstop, but in with yourself in your own bubble, loss of interest in activities that usually like, of harming self and others. So and she after that gives some coping strategies. So how, and this is a good segue to our last topic. So burnout prevention, she mentions that we need to know our limits and be honest with ourselves and the situation. So I think this comes in with my about how they should be acknowledging and not just like knowing, actually acknowledging them. Set realistic goals, and again that echoes what Elyse have mentioned on small baby steps so that they can be sustainable. Seek support from friends and local services. So again, this is what Lindsay have mentioned. She has like people that she trusts that will always fight back, self-care, and then at the end is join support group, which the peer-to-peer. So thank you so much, Shweta. And I want to mention again that when we're going to post that live on our page, we're going to add this, including Rapid Action Health as a resource for caregivers and mental health. So coming to the end of our topic, I see the time is flying fast. So what are the coping strategies for caregivers, how to cope with the acute medical issues and the chronic mental issues, and what does it entail to have a support system? What does that support? What does it mean to have a support system? So Elyse, if you like to start that, and Shweta, please just add your response in the chat, and I will make sure to play it.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, we've talked a little bit about some coping strategies and supports. On the support system piece, I think that is one of possibly one of the more challenging ones, only because from my experience, we don't all have the same lived experience, right? Depending on our lives and our health and all of these things. And so I know for me as a caregiver, when I would reach out to people who didn't have a shared experience as me, they might be the most wonderful, loving humans in the world that I can turn to about challenges in my relationship or friendship challenges or whatever else. But when I would talk about my caregiving experience, if they didn't have that same lived experience as me, sometimes it was met with, well, why don't they just go to the doctor and get better? Or like, maybe go see a chiropractor. Like these things that are so well-meaning and so meant to help, but don't actually meet the need that I have in that moment of being heard, of feeling seen and supported, of being understood, or having the issue actually understood, which they can't necessarily because they might not have that knowledge or experience. And so I think that's where having support systems for different aspects of life is really important. There were people and places that I went to talk about my caregiving experience that I didn't talk about with other people in my life whom I love dearly. Just as I didn't use that support system in my caregiving world for other aspects of my life because maybe we weren't necessarily that connected in that way. And so that's what I love about support groups, is you're all living with this shared lived experience. So I know folks that come to caregivers, they come into the room nervous, like, what am I going to be met with, and what are people going to say, and what do I say? And I always have them, when it's their first group, check in towards the end, because they spend an hour and a half with us listening to everybody who has similar lived experience with them. And 9 times out of 10, they start with, wow, I've heard so much of my story in the stories of others. So focusing, kind of honing in on the support system piece, I think finding really targeted support systems is important, because we can't be everything to everybody, right? And sometimes when we need that support, we need to seek a safe space to get it. And again, it's not to say that all of our support systems aren't wonderful. It's just, you know, we wouldn't go to a personal trainer to talk about my brain tumor, right? Like we're not going to talk to them about that, because that's not within their experience and expertise. So we should look at support systems the same way, and make sure that we're accessing support systems that feel safe to us.
That's such a great point. The key word and the key message that I think for everyone watching us is shared experience. So important, because you relate really well to similar Lindsay, what would you like to add to that from your personal experience?
I completely agree. As I mentioned, supports in my family and my friends, the people that walk beside me day to day in life, absolutely. But finding people to talk to in the community through conferences, through Facebook groups, so on, that has been completely different. Speaking to somebody who's not involved in my day-to-day life is very healing. Hearing their stories, being able to share mine, and just validate everything I have gone through and everything that I feel is very healing. It's very powerful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I would like to add that Shweta from Rapid Action Health also responded to that. So she more talked about the self-care component strategies. So a simple way for self-care is to, within a budget, is actually to divide it into categories: free and mental time. Take some dollars and time and cost money and take time. So I think it's about budget. Like, it's actually important, and put a small budget for your self-care and for your well-being. It is important. So, but other than just the monetary value of that, it's also important to actually also plan a time for that. So this is a really good message as well for everyone who is watching us today. So with that, it's gonna be almost 1 soon. So we're really at the end of our Facebook Live. Again, thank everyone who joined us today. Again, sorry for Shweta. We don't know why the Facebook Live it wasn't working, and you weren't able to join. I will see how we can try to get another live with you, talk about mental health again. Sorry about that. So with that, I want to ask our panelists if they have any last message to say to our listeners today.
Yeah, I would love to start. I'd like to mention that I love being a caregiver. And you spoke about the positive aspects. They far outweigh the negative. And it is challenging at times, absolutely, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And I know that my loved ones know that. I love being a person that people can come to and can trust. And it's something I value very deeply. So I want to point out that it is a great experience for me as well. It's complicated, but wouldn't have it any other way.
Thank you for bringing it back to the positive, and knowing you on a personal level, you're the most compassionate person I know. So we are lucky to have you in our lives. What would you like to add?
Yeah, I love what you said, Lindsay. And one of my favorite phrases this year, and like a reminder to myself and people that I'm chatting with, is that two things can be true at once. I think our linear, cute little brains like to be like, you know, that's not the case. But as you said, being a caregiver has really been an amazing growth experience for me. It connected my dad and I in a way that I didn't think would be possible. And it's opened up a world for me that I'm able to help others in that. So really, I'm eternally grateful for my experience with him. Although I wish he didn't have suffering, I'm grateful for all that it brought our relationship. If that had to be the reality. And I think too, one thing I wanted to mention in regards to self-care as a closing thought is really anything can be self-care as long as we're intentional about it. And I think we forget that going and sitting on the couch in a sunbeam for 5 minutes and closing your eyes and just being with yourself and the warmth in that moment can be a beautiful act of self-care. And sometimes we make it inaccessible for ourselves, but it doesn't have to be. And I loved Shweta's tips on that as well, because it's all about intentionality, and something that's going to make you feel good and nourish you will ultimately support you in nourishing and supporting your loved one. It's that old saying of you can't pour from an empty cup. And while sometimes we're like, oh, I know, it's true. And so however we can support ourselves, that's going to only encourage us or support us in being better caregivers and loved ones and humans. So
thank you so much for that positive message at the end. It's really important for the listeners and the families with us today to hear that. So again, at the end of the live, I want to thank you for being here at the Canadian Mental Health Association. Lindsay, a caregiver for LDS families, and also our amazing line coordinator at the Fondation. I want to also really thank Shweta for being with us and being very active on that and providing her responses. She has a last message that I'm going to read. Sorry, she wasn't able to engage better with everyone. But again, we will take offline and see how we can try to do maybe live with Shweta. It's very important to have a moment of stillness, no matter how small it is. Thank you for being with us, Shweta. So I want to also end by saying that the Loeys-Dietz Syndrome Foundation Canada is here to support you, to support the family and that are affected with LDS. In the meantime, I think it's good that we started the conversation today, but I urge everyone who is listening to us today to start the conversation with their families, with their surrounding about mental health, and start the dialogue about mental health for their well-being, for the well-being of the caregivers, their recipients. So, merci tout le monde et merci d'être là parmi nous aujourd'hui. Et on vous revient avec d'autres Facebook Live series bientôt. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.